Welcome to the show. It is Tuesday as we bundle up and we freeze outside in South Bend. Supposed to be like 60 degrees here by the end of the week, but we've still got Arctic temperatures here right now in the wake of that snow that you saw for Saturday's Notre Dame Navy game. Most of the real accumulation came Sunday and yesterday, along with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well until I got here and he told me my head looked fuzzy. Then it started to ruin my day. But I always like when on a day like today when I get to do the show with you, because then I get to tell you Happy Veterans Day live in front of everyone. Remind all of our good listeners that you're a veteran. There's a lot of veterans in our family. I usually feel guilty on a day like today because I basically killed the lineage of veterans. So
that's okay. That's okay. You did well for yourself. You educated yourself and everything else. Yes. Happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans listeners out there. Tyler, sitting off screen here in the studio, is a even younger than you veteran. He's sitting in here. He'll be producing the next few days while I'm out doing basketball and traveling and everything else with Notre Dame women's basketball. But happy Veterans Day to all of our viewers, listeners who are out there. And you're welcome to everyone who got a day off today who isn't a veteran. I thought about the irony of that when I was out checking my mail. I was like, oh, yeah, it's Veterans Day. These chuckers get the day off. I'm the one who actually served and gave them the day off. So you're welcome, my friends.
You're even wearing your Dallas Cowboys veteran sweatshirt.
My salute. I got my salute to service. Got the flag on the sleeve and everything else. But I was thinking about the, kind of like, you talked about on both sides of both my family and my wife's family as well. We've got a lot of veterans. Both her dad and grandfather are veterans, and both my dad and his dad are veterans on the other side. And going back to World War II, where, like your what would those be? Great grandparents. My grandpa served in World War II. Your mom's grandfather served in World War II, and the divergence of the families, because my grandpa, who you're named after, Jesse, served in the Big Red One, the First Army Division, which of course is based in Fort Riley, Kansas. So he served in the Big Red One. He fought at the Battle of the Bulge. Your other grandpa on the other side, my wife, your mom's grandfather, also in the Battle of the Bulge, but he was in Patton's Third Army. And so they both, like they may have crossed paths in the mud or the snow or wherever over there. But then ultimately, your great-grandfather, Joe Frendel, goes back to Kansas. He ultimately helps build Allen Fieldhouse at the University of Kansas. And then my grandfather, Jesse, becomes a career Army guy. They bop all over the place, all over the world, Japan, Germany, Georgia, Arkansas, like wherever you could possibly go. But his last station was Fort Riley, Kansas. And because of that, my parents ended up meeting. And then he retires. He ends up working at the University of Kansas. He ran a dining hall in one of the residence halls there for several years until he retired from that. But then both my father-in-law and my father, your two grandfathers, both served in Vietnam. They all came back, and ultimately my wife, your mom, and I met at the University of Kansas as well. So it's a big world, but everything kind of melted down into one spot. So I was thinking about that today. But again, happy Veterans Day. That's a long-winded way of saying happy Veterans Day.
Yeah, you gave me a lot of information there that I wasn't aware of, or maybe had forgot. But I know you don't forget those things.
Maybe it just flew past you.
Yes.
At some point. Yes. Of course, you and your sister both born 5 minutes from the University of Kansas as well. By the way, Tyler, my quote-unquote Army veteran friend over here, is a Missouri guy. So we've got that to deal with in the studio today. Yes.
Take me back to the Big 8 days.
That's right. Well, again, happy Veterans Day. Appreciate, obviously, all the service of all the veterans out there. And again, you're welcome if you got the day off today. So It is Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down Day. It's our weekly stock check of Notre Dame football. And Jesse is like, I was doing this. This was both the easiest and the hardest, I think, Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down Day, because don't feel like there were many downs. Like, do you have any, you want to just start with that? Do you have any Shamrock Downs in this little show today?
I don't have, Shamrock Downs per se. I'm just going to go out there and say I think this was Notre Dame's most complete game of the season for a multitude of reasons. I know you got to play Navy, and it was their backup quarterback, but it's still, the triple option is tough. I still thought that they, even though, it is Navy in the triple option, I still think they did a lot of good things defensively. And so, yeah, I thought that this was their most well-rounded game of the entire season. If I had to pick like one thing, one thing, it was Mark Zachary getting beat on the one pass play. If I had to nitpick, and that's not even Shamrock Down, I just think that's the worst thing that happened that day. And if that's the worst thing that happens to you, you're doing things really well.
Yeah, the touchdown and the long run by Woodson, the Navy quarterback, that was it. But again, it's like that's kind of a busted run. It's a scramble and a great athlete that turned into a 41-yard run. Ultimately, I don't think we can give any stock downs for the game. None of the coaches, none of the players. Have we ever seen a stock drastically drop one week and then dramatically rise the next week, like Erik Schmidt / the kickers, however you want to phrase this whole thing, going from Boston College and all the missed kicks to Erik Schmidt basically being perfect in everything that he did against Navy last week?
I don't think we have, but I don't want to jump the gun a little bit too prematurely because I'd like to see him make something more than the extra points. Like the 7 out of 7 extra points, Vince would probably tell you he could go out there and make 7 out of 7 extra points. So
Vince would tell you a lot of things, though. So get that out of the way.
But I want to see it, more kind of under pressure beyond kind of 30 yards. We'll get there, but going 7 on 7 is definitely getting back on the right track, especially after the abysmal performance we saw against Boston College.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my point, because not only was he 7 for 7 on extra points, which is to be expected. I'm not like giving him any big gold stars or, like multiple shamrocks and pats on the back or any of that kind of stuff, because you expect the extra points to be good. It's a given. It's supposed to be automatic, but all 8 of his kickoffs were touchbacks as well. And, so like, again, that's 15 out of 15 in total. All you want from the kicking game is not to notice it. Ultimately, that's really all you want, and that's what you got. Now, got to continue to go out and prove he can do that consistently. But I've got to think that after that train wreck at Boston College and what he turned it into against Navy, it's got to be a really good sign. Because really, like the first one wasn't necessarily wobbling, but it was a little bit of a knuckleball extra point. But after that, everything looked smooth and fluid and just generally looked really good. So, again, like to go from really the lowest of lows when you're talking about the kicking game to not the highest of highs, but it's up there. I mean, the next real step for him is to come into a pressure situation or even any situation where he's got to kick a field goal and kick a field goal through. That's the next thing. But like the weather conditions were not great, obviously, Saturday night. So I think that all things considered, you got to give him a stock up. And again, a big jump from one week to the next. Stymie in the YouTube chat says Shamrock down to the late kickoff. Not happy about that. Notre Dame Navy. I think we could all all
have to worry about that for this Saturday.
That's right. Going to go from a night game to a noon game. And we'll talk about that. Indy Forever 72 says offensive line struggled at times in the run game. And they did. Can we kind of chalk it up to the, because like ditto Boston College, can we chalk it up a little bit to the fact that the way Navy played it, like they were obviously very committed to trying not to let Jeremiah Love be a factor. They committed all their resources to shutting down the running game? Can we chalk it up mostly to that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, by Notre Dame standards, they might not have had the best game, but if you look at the box score, they had 38 attempts for 250 yards. That's 6.6 per carry. Those aren't bad numbers at the end of the day. I know it didn't maybe look pretty at times.
And obviously Love helps that when he's able to crank off one long run, it kind of boosts.
Yeah, but this is an interesting conversation that I've been wanting to bring up for a long time. I hate the people who say, well, if you subtract out the 85 run or the 50-yard run, that's the whole point. Like, that's part of his game is he can break one on you, and it still happened, right? And so
that's why they commit the resources to it, because they don't want that to happen.
Right, and so yes, is it skewed by a couple of runs or two? Sure, but with a loaded box and the ability to still hit on some of those big runs, I still think that, that's part of the game. And especially if you start to lax and drop more into coverage, those big runs are going to happen.
I agree. I totally agree with that. Again, now another test coming up with Pittsburgh. I'm really curious to see how Pat Narduzzi and Pitt decides they want to defend Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman was saying yesterday that he thinks that they're going to commit to shutting down the run. That's fine. We'll see how that plays out, because their pass defense is really not that great either. They've got a really good run defense, but the pass defense pretty suspect. And so I think that there's kind of some give and take, and obviously CJ Carr, and we'll talk about him in a minute, has shown what he can do when you decide to go with that game plan. How about officiating? First time since 1997, the Irish went without a penalty against them in a run game, kind of like the kicking game. You want the officials to be just sort of blend in with the scenery out there. And when no flags are thrown, it definitely makes for a much more enjoyable viewing situation. What did you think?
Yeah, I think that you have to give the officiating a big sock up. But for me, I think it shows more kind of the cleanup that Notre Dame did on their part. Yes, there wasn't, the stupid, like, oh my gosh, those aren't penalties. What are you calling here? But also Notre Dame didn't put themselves into, procedural pre-snap penalties, false starts, offsides, illegal shifts, that sort of stuff. And so you combine the fact that the refs didn't have those, head scratching, stupid penalties, almost, fake holdings and stuff like that. And then Notre Dame also didn't have the mental error. So, that combined for the no penalties is a huge Shamrock up for me.
I do kind of wonder, though, as well, different kind of athlete, like when you look at the kind of receivers that Notre Dame secondary is covering, for example, like they're not going to stress you nearly as much as if you're playing Texas A&M or, whoever, Miami, obviously, those two teams, or even Purdue for that matter, or Arkansas. They're not going to stress you the same, so like how much of that maybe plays into it, because there were some mismatches there. But as you said, just the fact, like, it's still, what is this, 28 years since Notre Dame went without a penalty in a game. That's pretty significant. I don't think it was just the officiating crew, but hey, maybe they wanted to get out of there too. Maybe they weren't enjoying standing out there in the snow and everything else all night long. Do you knock the defense at all for giving up 206 rushing yards, Mr. Option
No
guy?
No. That's you look at the box score from the game. Notre Dame was giving up 4.1 yards per play. And that's, factoring in a couple of Navy's big ones on that 41-yard run. And I think most impressively, Navy only had, by definition, 7 explosive plays. And explosive plays in the run game is categorized as 10+ yards.
Mm-hmm.
Really, like, if you wanted to say explosive plays for the triple option, to me is like 20+ yards, because they're running the ball every time, right? It's a triple option. I think they only had like 1 or 2 runs over 20 yards. The rest were, a few of those 7 of those explosive plays were around like 10, 11, 12-yard rushes. I thought the defense did tremendous. And another stat that I kind of found when I was digging up today, they haven't given up a fourth quarter point in 6 straight games now. Did you know that?
I did not notice that, but that is
Yeah.
very, I knew that second half they've held a massive advantage going back to that Purdue game even, but I didn't, like for the fourth quarter itself, I hadn't even really kind of realized that trend. So say that again, no points.
6 straight games in the last fourth quarter of their games. I mean, that's just complete second half dominance. That is putting your foot on the throat and letting the offense kind of just go into cruise control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that 4.1 yards per play that you're talking about is significant as well, because for the season, Notre Dame is giving up 5 yards per play, and they themselves are averaging 7.3 per play. So significant number holding Navy to that kind of play. Now, again, Blake Horvath was not in there. Really, the threat of the passing game was gone when he was out. And that was the first thing I thought of when they said that Horvath was out and it was going to be Braxton Woodson. And once Notre Dame kind of got things settled down, in terms of, Vince and I talked a little bit about it yesterday, where he was able to kind of do his damage was Notre Dame's ends just weren't they weren't setting the end nearly well enough. And that was one of the keys that we talked about at the end of last week with how you defend the option and keep the quarterback in check. They just weren't doing it good enough. And once they made the adjustment and got things figured out, it was fine. But, looking in the middle at when we talk about, and we'll talk about the linebackers in a little bit, but when I look at the fact that you had no Donovan Heinisch in the game, and obviously you had no Gabriel Rubio in the game either. And then you look at Elijah Hughes, Jared Dawson, Jason Onye, and Armel Mukam played fairly significant snaps with 21 snaps in the game. They all played. Onye played the most of all of them with 30. They didn't put up huge stats, but that's not what you're looking for from those guys, especially in this kind of game. Is we talked about the first key to dealing with the option is taking away the dive. And those guys, the least experienced of the whole crew, they took away the dive. And that was when you're facing Navy, that is key number one, and it was huge. And, so again, even though they didn't put up these big stats, they played really well, I thought.
Yeah, I think the linebackers were tremendous. And I think the reason why is because you were able to rotate in fresh bodies and continuously plug the fullback dive, the inside run, because you can play guys like Ausberry, Faremo more often because there's just really no threat of the passing game. Their one job is just to be a heat-seeking missile and clog the middle run, right? And so I think it's really impressive that Notre Dame saw that opportunity and took advantage of it and didn't say, hey, Drake Bowen, KVA, just play, however, 80 snaps against a triple option and you're thudding someone every play. Let's rotate in, these 4 or 5 linebackers that we have. They can stay fresh, not only in this game, but also throughout the rest of the season. And again, it's not a lot of responsibility when your main job is just to plug the inside run as a linebacker.
Yeah, exactly. I like how you switch from defensive tackles to linebackers and just shine the light on them right away. But Salty Virginia Peanuts in the YouTube chat says we need to be talking about these linebackers more. Glad to see Ausberry will be a topic somehow with little national fanfare. Kingston Viliamu Asa is increasingly becoming a malevolent force. And then he talks about your favorite guy, Drake the Snake Bowen, being the most unheralded middle linebacker of anyone doing things that he's doing. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of piggybacks a lot of the speech I just gave about the linebackers performing well. The thing that's most impressive about KVA is he is just a strong guy. Watching him blow up that fullback and then being able to stand on his feet and then tackle the quarterback. That man is a strong, and he plays so fast. That's what's scary about KVA is how fast and hard that he's able to play. A lot of times when you see someone moving with that sort of velocity, you're going to hit and fall down, but he still has, the strength to stay up and really just run through people. It's really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, specifically big up for Jaiden Ausberry as well, but up for the linebackers, the linebackers and all those guys on the interior played exceptionally well, but huge jump in production for Ausberry. He leads the team with 8 tackles. He has 2 tackles for loss, a sack, forced a fumble as well, all in 42 snaps. And so for the season now, 41 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. And again, 2 of them came against Navy. One of his 2 sacks on the season came against Navy, all in 282 snaps. So, like, when you look at him, this is what's tough about the triple option is how much of this is transferable, do you think, for him going forward?
It's hard to say. I think that, again, when you're playing someone like Navy, I think his skills set is matches kind of just downhill, be an athlete, hit someone. You're in a confined space. You're really not worried about anything outside of that interior box when you're playing an offense like Navy. So it's just, I think the rest of the game is what gets him, but when you can put a singular focus on task and responsibility, the game can become a lot more clear, right? And you can play with more velocity.
Someone on the Irish Breakdown Champions Lounge the other day was making predictions about who Notre Dame's next 5 first-round NFL draft picks will be. And we were talking about Kingston Viliamu Asa, and a couple people mentioned him. And I just think this is not a knock on Kingston. I think it's going to be really hard for him to be a first-round pick, kind of like a running back, because of the position he plays. I think that the only way that Kingston ends up being a first-round NFL draft pick is if some team a la Micah Parsons, and what happened with him, because he was a middle linebacker at Penn State, and he was even a middle linebacker early in his career in Dallas, but he ended up moving to the edge and becoming an edge rusher. And I think that's if someone sees that in Kingston Viliamu Asa, that being just an edge rusher is, like what would suit him more, which, I mean, he has shown that he is really good at it. I think that that's the only way that he could end up being a first-round guy, don't you?
Yeah, I completely agree. The only way you beat me to it, I wanted to say it before you, but what gets you drafted in the first round on the defensive side of the ball is you got to be an elite pass rusher, or elite in the secondary. That's really the best 2 ways to get drafted in the first round of the NFL. Like, you don't just like straight up inside linebackers. That's like a solid 3rd, 4th round pick. You don't have to waste a first round pick on something like an inside linebacker. You want someone who's a game changer, create turnovers, sacks, that sort of stuff.
I agree. We've got more Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down coming on the show in this hour. We'll talk a little bit about quarterback play. We'll talk more something in the secondary that I want to get to, and some more. I want to touch on some wide receivers as well. There's a lot that we're going to get to before this hour ends. So Shamrock Up, it's our weekly Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down. It's mostly up today, but it is our weekly stock check of Notre Dame football, and we'll continue when we return. Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. We continue Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com, along with Jesse Stiers, Sean Stiers. It's Tuesday, Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down, our weekly stock check of Notre Dame football. We've covered the kickers. We've covered a lot of defense. Was there any I did want to mention Devontae Smith. I think you got to give him a Shamrock Up. He started at cornerback with Christian Gray out, and obviously Smith has battled some injuries and stuff himself this year, but played really well out there, really just across the board. I thought the defense, especially considering it is Navy and it looks different than anything you've seen to this point and anything you're going to see the rest of the season, I thought the defense was just really good across the board. Devontae Smith, Madden Faramo, he got out there, and you talked about rotating those linebackers with all those guys taking a pounding and all that stuff. So a lot of good stuff from the defense.
Yeah, I think Devontae Smith is a huge point to be made because he did play corner in Christian Gray's absence. But, again, I like Notre Dame's kind of thought process here. If there was no reason to really push Christian Gray to play, and Devontae Smith, a guy who has been, struggling with some of his own injuries, kind of stepped up into that role and had a really big game. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up either. I meant to before the break. I think it's time to do like a temperature check of Chris Ash, especially.
I feel like we do that every week. Like,
well, considering too, Marcus Freeman, Denbrock, a lot of these guys struggle their first time against the triple option. And we talked about this last week. I know that Marcus Freeman was probably a big help. But still, it's crazy how we can go from the hot boiling water of Purdue week and now be going, Notre Dame is respectable in a lot of areas on defense. Not only are they, good, I think they've gotten themselves to very respectable areas, especially in the turnovers, their run defense.
Look, just look at the bottom line is points. And that's why, going back to the rushing yards that Navy has. Look, you expect you're going to give up some rushing yards to Navy. And I think 200 yards is very tolerable against Navy. It's going to screw up. I've always said this. It screws up the national, stats in terms of what your rush defense looks like, because very few other Power 4 teams have to deal with Navy, and it's always going to up your average a little bit. But the bottom line is still points, and they only gave up 10 points. And you talked about the fourth quarter advantage and the fact they haven't given up any fourth quarter points over the last 6 games. That is huge. And that's really the only stat that matters. So, the other team might get some yards and some this and that, like BC got a little bit more passing yards. Well, Notre Dame also essentially ground to a halt BC's running game. They're really good against the run. And so a one-off against Navy doesn't bother me. The bottom line is the points. And when you look at the fact that they have gone from what they were at the beginning of the season to a top 20 scoring defense at this point, it is huge, as Manti Te'o would say. That is major. So, yeah. So I think I agree with the gist of what you're saying, because we were willing to throw all the rocks at Chris Ash early on, but it's a much more than just respectable defense right now. Honestly, I feel like people are just kind of sitting there waiting for the other shoe to fall and just waiting for some kind of disaster to happen.
Yeah,
so sure. I told you so, and that'll, the first time you get into a college football playoff game and you give up a couple touchdowns, you're going to hear a lot of that. But
it feels like I think the thing I was getting at the most is it feels like we're transitioning back to that Al Golden style of defense where early on they might get you a little bit, but as the game goes on and as the fourth quarter comes, they've got everything figured out and they're not going to let you score any more points. And I feel like that's got to be something, very comforting for a team that's about to enter into, hopefully high leverage games here in about a month or so.
Irish for Life 99 must have got in late. We started out talking about Erik Schmidt a little bit ago, and big Shamrock Up for him. Paulo 27 in the YouTube chat has a question, Jesse. He says, we doing whiteboard? Let's go.
Thursday
whiteboard. Okay. Thursday.
I'm anticipating. I'm going to do a little offense because I'm anticipating. I know Pitt likes to run man, and I know they like to stack the box, and I know Narduzzi has made the comment that he's going to, fortify against the run.
By the way, we'll talk Pat Narduzzi in rapid fire in the second hour of the show today. So don't worry your pretty little heads about that. We've got plenty of that. We were talking about the officiating a little bit ago. Cindy says, were there any replay reviews? She says, I don't remember any. I don't remember any either. I don't think there was anything reviewed in the game off the top of my head, unless somebody else remembers something that I don't. But, again, like when you talk about game flow, that really kept it going. Okay, CJ Carr. We haven't talked about him yet. And for the second straight week, speaking of how opposing defenses are playing Notre Dame, in a second straight week, an opposing defense loads the box and said, CJ Carr is going to have to beat us with his arm. And so what does Carr do? He goes 13 of 16 for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns. None of it eye-popping, but the 13.6 yards per attempt is pretty eye-popping. That's pretty good. Here's Marcus Freeman on how teams are playing CJ Carr.
You're seeing multiple different teams. You're seeing teams, as the last 2 weeks say, hey, we're going to get down there, right? And we're going to stop the run maybe and show us zero coverage. I think back to Boston College, was that middle field safety playing zero, or is it cover one? Like he was trying to run out there. He was showing in the box, but ran out to play the middle of the field. And so he's just got to be able to adjust to some different looks, right? I think teams at the end of the day are still saying we can't allow Notre Dame to run the football because that's detrimental, right? And that's where CJ's got to continuously be good at recognizing what the defense is telling you. There's tells, like there's always tells, and he's doing an amazing job at that. And so it just goes to the preparation, but now the experience of understanding all these different things that he's seen, he's able now to recognize. And I always say, recall something you see, right? That's recognize, right? And he's able to do that, even if they haven't shown this look, particularly this defense. He's able to recall something he's seen in the past that says, okay, this is what coverage they're going to. Let's make the right decision.
And it's amazing to me, Jess, how quickly he's been able to pick it up. I mean, obviously he grew up football family. We all know all of that stuff. But these are his first career college games. And there have been a lot of other guys. Look at Arch Manning. He comes from a football family as well. It is taken him, for a guy who's been in school 3 times as long, or maybe not 3 times as long, about twice as long as CJ Carr at this point. It's taken him even longer as a first-time, full-time starting quarterback this season. So I'm amazed at how quickly Carr is able to pick it up, and I do feel like sometimes if maybe there is a little bit of hesitation from him, for the most part, hasn't been fatal flaws, but it's also like if there's those hesitations, like what Marcus Freeman was talking about with the safety and stuff like that, they're trying to there's some veteran coaches out there who get paid a lot of money to try to shut down whatever quarterback and offense they happen to be facing, and I think that they're trying their best to give him some things that might confuse him a little bit, but for the most part, he's continued to pass the test with flying colors.
Yeah, and I think that's the most impressive part of his game, and is going to be, ultimately what takes Notre Dame, I think, to great success or maybe kind of falling short, because I think as the season goes on, what the game plan is going to be is they're going to be hot in the box pre-snap, maybe 6-7 guys, and then like Marcus Freeman talked about, okay, what are they doing post-snap, and is CJ Carr going to be able to recognize when you have that kind of one player that tilts whether or not it should be, a run or a pass, and CJ Carr just continuously making the right decision of, okay, I know what you're trying to do here. I'm either going to stick to run or change to a pass. But I 100% agree that what Marcus Freeman is saying is like teams are defaulting to, I think after what happened against, USC, we're not going to let that happen to us.
We will not let that happen. Like USC has laid the blueprint of what not to do for everybody out there.
Yeah, but I think what I'm most interested to see is when CJ Carr kind of has to play what I would say like a really complete defense, a team that is good in the secondary and up front and can do enough to kind of disguise you, trick you, because no quarterback is perfect, right? Like you don't get it right every single play. So I think when the game's get more intense, I'm curious to see how CJ Carr responds, because I think it's easy to perform right now. Like, yes, the stakes are high, but they could be a lot higher. Like what is he doing under extreme pressure?
Yeah, and I really, again, like Narduzzi is a defensive guy, and kind of what he tries to throw at him. I really wonder how that's going to go, because like you remember back in 2018 when Notre Dame went to the college football playoff for the first time with Ian Book as the starting quarterback. Notre Dame, they come in, Pitt comes into Notre Dame Stadium. I think that was the first time they wore those uniforms. Like at that point they were throwback uniforms, and now they've become their full-time uniforms again. But they were dropping 8 all day, and it was just really confusing Ian Book. It doesn't feel like that's how you confuse CJ Carr. And so like he's a completely different chapter that you have to try to get through if you're Pittsburgh. A lot different kind of quarterback than Ian Book. So I'm just really curious to see what they have in store, what they try to do with CJ Carr, and how they try to manage all of that. CJ Carr, of course, would not be what he is without the wide receivers that he has to throw to as well. Marcus Freeman talked yesterday about the fact that there really is no clear-cut number one wide receiver on this team. Here's what he had to say.
Obviously, the top 3 are playing as well as, anyone, right? Between Malachi and FaZe and Will. KK's continuing to improve and make big plays like he did Saturday in the game, and some other guys are stepping up. So, it's a credit to the work they put in, right? The work they put in. But I always say the statistics reflect, 1, decision-making on the quarterback, but 2, the confidence for the offensive coordinator to say, hey, we're going to scheme this up, that this is your first read to this wideout or whoever it is. And so, again, it's great to hear, right? It's great to hear and to see multiple guys really performing well. Coach Brown's done a great job in that room. He acquired some talent that are the right fits, but really good football players. And credit to CJ for being able to put the ball where it needs to be and making the right decisions. And then the offensive line's got to protect so they can so CJ has time to get the ball to those guys. So there's a lot of different things that go into that, but it's a really good situation.
All right. It's interesting, Jesse, because way back at the beginning of the season, after Notre Dame faced Miami, you might remember, like we were talking about the Miami game the next week, and we had some Miami fans who jumped in the show on YouTube, and because I was talking about the fact that, hey, those Miami receivers, were they good? Yeah. But were they so special that you needed to dedicate that much zone coverage to them because you were because you were worried about getting beaten deep? I said no. And, Miami fans took offense to that. They were basically saying, that I was saying that the receivers weren't any good. I didn't say they weren't any good. I just said they weren't so special that you needed to devote that kind of zone coverage to them. But like when you go look at the Miami receiver stats right now and compare them to Notre Dame's wide receiver stats, there's not that much difference in what you see. And, obviously it starts with the quarterback, but he's got a really good group out there to throw to as well.
Yeah, I think what the most impressive thing about this wide receiver group is the whole room is solid. It's not just one guy or maybe 1.5 guys, 2 guys. The whole room is good, and that's what Marcus Freeman was getting into, is they don't scheme plays for certain players. They scheme plays in general, and they have different guys who can run those routes open, basically. And I think what makes that so appealing is when you talk about trying to take away Notre Dame's offense, you can try to take away Jeremiah Love, but if you even slow him down, then you're like, okay, who can we take away in the throwing game? Notre Dame doesn't have that one person that you can just pinpoint again, right? Like, so
Yeah.
You can't just take away pieces and say, okay, we figured them out. Notre Dame has a multi-layer attack in both the running game and the passing game, where the receivers, these plays aren't designed for, okay, we need Malachi Fields to get open here. This play is designed to open up in a general area, and whoever's running that route is running that route. So I think it makes it really hard for a defense to game plan and figure out, where do we start on figuring out how to stop this offense?
I agree. And the fact that you do have that quarterback and those wide receivers and those running backs, it's obviously what makes them so hard to beat, and why they are putting these opposing defensive coordinators in such a bind, because you have to try to stop something. And typically you think, well, if they've got a first-time starting quarterback, that's the way to go, but that hasn't been the way to go so far. We'll take our final timeout of this hour, and then we're back to wrap up hour number 1. We've got hour number 2 with rapid fire coming up after 6 o'clock. We'll talk about and hear Pat Narduzzi's comments and more. Still more to come this hour as well. One or two more comments from Marcus Freeman when we return. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Finishing up the first hour of Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. And Jess, Notre Dame obviously travels to Pittsburgh this week, so they'll face a more traditional offense, I guess you would say, compared to the triple option. The Panthers have won 5 straight. Marcus Freeman was asked at his press conference yesterday about the idea of a post-option hangover for his defense, going from a one-off offense to more traditional. Here's what he had to say.
Can't remember specifically, but I think last year we might have had a bye right before Navy. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was a bye after Navy. Well, that goes away for what I was about to say, but anyways, look, it can be real. It can be, or it can be not. If you put the work in and you go to work and prepare the right way. Like, I'm never going to allow myself or our guys to make an excuse for a performance below what we have set for ourselves. So, I don't know. Navy's in the past. We got to get ready for Pitt.
It may be real or it can be not. So what do you think, Jess? Again, you used to play against an option offense in high school, a couple different teams with options. Is there a big adjustment going from facing that option to a quote unquote more traditional, like a team that's going to throw the ball more and do the more traditional stuff the next week?
I don't necessarily think so. I just think the hardest thing you have to deal with is just kind of like the naggingness of playing that physical game. You're going to have a couple more bumps and bruises and
The
stuff
extra
like
soreness.
that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like it's not like this huge adjustment to go back to playing, like coverages and obviously, having to respect more of the pass element. So I think as long as you come out of it really injury free, that's the biggest thing you have to worry about.
Yeah. And looking at the injury report, there's really nothing new compared to, before. And, like there's a chance that they even get some more guys back this week, just depending on how things go. No Irish for Life 99 in the YouTube chat. That was not me correcting Marcus Freeman. Not at all. It was not even close. Not even close. Jesse disappeared there on me. I don't know exactly where he went. Oh, there he comes.
I was having some audio issues. I had to refresh the connection.
Back to the Pittsburgh defense. We were talking about that and how they might play him. Indy Forever 72 says that he thinks that Pitt's going to load the box, try to stop the run, blitz like a madman in passing situations.
Yeah.
I would think so. That hasn't necessarily worked out against CJ Carr, though, this year, has it?
No, I think I think this is exactly right, though. I think you can expect to see the box loaded up versus run. And then same thing with passing situations. They're going to disguise it the same and then bring extra guys in pressure. And I really think they're just going to try to get CJ Carr to get the ball out quick, not allow anything to develop downfield, that sort of stuff. So I would expect Notre Dame to kind of move the pocket a little bit, get CJ Carr kind of rolling out, avoiding some of that pressure so they can develop some stuff. But I think it all starts with the run game, even though, yes, they might load up the box. If you run the ball, everything else will open up.
Yep. Notre Dame's not just going to abandon the run. They have obviously shown that in these last couple games, and that's what Marcus Freeman, I think that this week is a bigger challenge for Notre Dame's offensive line, and maybe coming out of last week, it's a good opportunity to challenge those guys physically a little bit, to be up for the challenge when they face a good Pitt Panthers run defense this week. We will take our top of the hour break. When we come back, it's rapid fire in hour number 2. There will be Pat Narduzzi talk. There'll be some Brian Kelly talk. There will be other talk as well. It's all coming up on Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Rapid fire in the 6 o'clock hour. Yes, it's hour 2 of the show, Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. I am Sean Stiers, and Jesse Stiers coming out of Blackout in the YouTube channel. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
There's a lot to get to, so we better get going.
We ignited the chat as soon as we went into that last break. It was just like a maelstrom in there. Everybody went crazy. Second college football playoff rankings come out tonight. Where will the Irish be when the rankings are announced?
Easy, simple. They'll move up one spot to number 9. I think they'll jump BYU. I think everyone in the world will have their hair on fire that Notre Dame is ahead of BYU. But yeah, I think that they'll be number 9, and they'll be right on the edge of that coveted 8 spot and hosting a game.
Is it really coveted? I mean, I realize you get to host the game rather than go on
Tougher
the road.
matchup, right? Is that what you would maybe say? Or
yeah, I mean, because the fact that you get an 8-9, a little bit tougher matchup in that first round game, and then if you win that game, you play the number 1 seed. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, it's great that you get to host, but I still am a little leery of the fact that you would have to play the 1 seed.
Well, I'm selfish and want the home game. That doesn't mean that they couldn't move up to 7, 6,
Yeah.
and you never know how the whole picture is going to shake out at the end.
Somebody just posted something. Stymie says 8 in front of Oregon, who's living on preseason AP hype. I agree with the second part. Living on the AP preseason hype. They just got out of Iowa with a win. And by the way, by the skin of a safety that started the game. I don't know how much of that game you got.
Did someone tell the game will be close? Maybe to take the Iowa spread? Anyone?
You're going to have to say that again. You were chopping up a little bit when you said that.
I said, did anyone close to you tell you to take the Iowa spread?
I don't think I remember hearing you say that. I don't remember anything about an Iowa spread.
Okay.
Must not have. I take it you took the Iowa spread. You must have said that in the spread option last Thursday.
I did.
All right. Should have followed more of your advice in that. Yeah, I do. I like Josh says, I think the rankings come out an hour earlier tonight, if I remember right. So at some point within the next couple weeks, I'm sure it's going to be halftime of a basketball game, which they do, a lot once the rankings start coming out. But I agree. I think they're going to be 9. I don't think Oregon is going to drop because they still just do have one loss. I think it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to start moving past any of these teams in front of them until they start, they all lose another game. Again, Oregon just got by against Iowa. That game, now it's what's interesting for Oregon, again, like how much of this is skewed by those initial rankings last week, but as of right now anyway, both USC and Washington are ranked, and I definitely don't think that USC is going to be a gimme game for Oregon. I think that that's going to be a pretty competitive game as well, and I think it's probably going to challenge them from an offensive standpoint. Like they're going to have to score more to beat USC, something that they haven't really had to do so far, like with the exception of Indiana, for example. And they, obviously they couldn't keep up with Indiana when it was all said and done. But yeah, I don't think it's going to change much for Notre Dame. They'll move up one spot. They'll be number 9, so they'll inch up. But again, some of these other teams will lose some games here and there, and so like as this thing goes on over the next 3 weeks, they'll have more chances to move up. But I think they'll be 9th this week.
Does Texas or Oklahoma jump BYU?
Ooh, I think Texas could. That's kind of the question. How far is BYU going to fall? BYU just showing that they had no offense. And, by the way, if you remember listening to me, I gave Bear Bachmeier some advice. You've got to get rid of number 47. I'm sorry. You can't be a quarterback and wear that number. You're not going to score any points. And that's what happened. But yeah, I think Texas
came down to.
I think Texas definitely has a chance to move past BYU. Irish for Life 99 wants to know if I made it to the Sports Grill Miami Lakes for the Miami game. I did not, because my Miami schedule ended up just being a train wreck because of
you loved it.
Well, we were delayed getting out of South Bend because of storms in Dallas. So I was in Dallas for, I don't even remember. It was, I think, at least 8 hours, there. And then I couldn't fly into Miami because all the flights were being rerouted and rebooked and all this stuff. I had to fly into Fort Myers, which is on the Gulf side of Florida. So I got in there, got in at around 2:30 or 3 to my hotel, slept for a few hours, rented a car, drove across the state to Miami. So I was not able to do anything extra besides getting some coffees from Dunkin' and getting over there and getting into the game. I guess I did actually. I tried to take a nap. I went to a movie theater and tried to nap a little bit in the afternoon. Never really fell asleep, though. So who would your top 4 teams be? What would your top 4? Like, are you rubber stamping what the committee gave us last week, or would yours look any different this week? Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, and Alabama in that order. What would your top 4 look like?
This is tough for me. I think that there's something deserving in being the national champion, sticking at number 1 and kind of continuing to get the respect of holding that spot until you kind of lose type situation. And it's not like Ohio State has looked bad in really any of their games. I wouldn't say they played anyone outside of that first game against Texas. I think Texas A&M and IU have a little bit better of a resume. But again, defending national champ, they haven't given you any signs to remove them from number 1. I kind of fall in that honor and respect. So I'd keep Ohio State at 1. I think Texas A&M at 2 because I think the SEC is the hardest conference. They're undefeated in the hardest conference. And then I'd have IU 3, Alabama 4.
Yeah, I would keep Alabama 4. I'm not completely sold on them, but really once you get to that number 4 spot, I think that's where like a lot of them are interchangeable. My top 3, I think that there is a very strong case for Texas A&M at number 1 because they have 3 road wins over ranked teams this season. And among those 3 teams, like that's more than the other 2, Ohio State and Indiana combined. The fact that A&M has gone on the road, obviously including the win at Notre Dame. They beat Missouri on the road this past weekend. They beat LSU when they were still ranked. So, I mean, like at the time of that they played the games anyway, they've beaten 3 ranked teams on the road. So I would put A&M number 1. I would have Ohio State number 2. It is very, very marginal, though, because like last week I was saying there was a case for Indiana at number 1. I think there's a case for any of these 3 teams at number 1.
Same.
But because of the fact that Indiana did struggle more on the road against a Penn State team that is still just reeling right now, I would have them at number 3 behind A&M and Ohio State, and then I would have Alabama at number 4. All right. So I got to find my audio here and get this ready to go. So, Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi had some things to say this week about this week's matchup with Notre Dame at his press conference. Here is Pat Narduzzi.
This is a must-win for this team when it comes to something.
Absolutely not. It is not an ACC game. I'm glad you brought that up. It's not an ACC game. I gladly get beat 103 or 110 to 10 in that game. They can put 100 up on us as long as we win the next 2 after that. But again, our focus is on Notre Dame and getting as many wins as we can.
I like how you hear whoever the reporter is there just cranking on the keyboard, typing out that quote. I would gladly lose 103 or 110 to 10 because it's not a conference game. What would you think if you heard your coach ever say something like that before a game you were getting ready to play?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go out there and give 100%. It's just ridiculous what Narduzzi was saying. Like, I understand it's not an ACC game, and your path right now, you believe, is the ACC championship and going and winning that game. But it's still Notre Dame at home against a top 10 team in the country. You can't say that you can't get fired up and you want to win that game. And I think there has to be a little bit of context. The question before mentioned that in his last 2 games, he's lost like a combined 110 to 3 or wherever. That's where that came from. But still, it doesn't matter because every game your intent should be to win a game. You should never go into a game and concede. Well, I don't care if we lose because it's not an ACC game. Like, what?
Right.
Who wants to go out and play for you in a top 10 matchup at home where game day is coming to? Aaron Donald's jersey is being retired. Like, there is so much going on. And for you as a head coach to say, well, I don't care if we lose 100-0. Like, it's the worst thing I've heard. I would not want to play for a coach like that.
And I mean, there's obviously some sideways shade at Notre Dame because
I mean, that's the root of it. He wanted to basically say they're not. It was just
they're
like
not
Texas
in the
Tech.
conference. Right.
He wanted to make a point that they're not in a conference, so why should their game matter at the end of the day?
Right. Exactly. And everyone's coming after Notre Dame with the independence and everything. And look, because as you mentioned, this is obviously an overcompensating deflection mechanism for Pat Narduzzi, because Notre Dame is just living right there in his head and not charging any rent. He is 0-4 against him since he's been at Pitt, and only one of the games has been close. I talked about it in the first hour, that 2018 game when the Irish won by 5 with Ian Book as the quarterback, and they were just dropping 8 into coverage all day. Confusing Book. He was having, issues with it. Notre Dame was having a hard time moving the football. They only win by 5 points. The Irish have won the other 3 meetings since Pat Narduzzi has been the head coach at Pitt by a total of 105 points after winning 58-7 when they played 2 years ago, So, like, he despises Notre Dame going back to his Michigan State days, maybe even before that. Remember, this is a guy who worked for Mark D'Antonio. And then, like all these conspiracy theorists last week, we were talking about how this committee favors Notre Dame, and you've got a couple former head coaches, including D'Antonio, who are in love with Notre Dame and all this kind of stuff. Mark D'Antonio has no love for Notre Dame, and, Pat Narduzzi doesn't have any of it either. The roots go back. Like, these are 2 Notre Dame rival stepchild programs, Michigan State and Pittsburgh, and Narduzzi is leading one of them. He has always hated Notre Dame, and he has no real way to deal with it because he has lost all these games to Notre Dame. Now, I do expect this game to be closer than 58-7, but Narduzzi is trying to find a way to kind of compartmentalize and bury this thing as deeply as he can, because he struggles when it comes to facing the Fighting Irish. Fill in the blank. Narduzzi also calling Notre Dame America's team is blank.
It's another subliminal shot, and I had to think about it to understand why. But when you think of America's team in the Dallas Cowboys, they got that name because they're on every American TV every weekend, whether you liked it or not. And that's basically what he's taking a jab at here is, well, Notre Dame's independent. They have that NBC deal. They're on everyone's TV. They're America's team. So again, Narduzzi found another way to wrap this thing around to, well, Notre Dame's not in a conference. Notre Dame has that mega TV deal. That's why they're not in a conference. That's why they're America's team. And so, again, he can't help himself when the microphone is set in front of his face, even though he gets his butt whooped by Notre Dame every single time.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious because, he knows that, they're essentially they're the golden child or one of the golden children of college football. And that's not what he's got at Pitt. And I think that it's just hilarious that, again, Notre Dame is so deep in Pat Narduzzi's, Notre Dame has invaded Pat Narduzzi's soul, and all he can do is trying to find these, little things to throw back. Irish for Life 99 in the YouTube chat says Narduzzi equals Signetti. I don't think that they're too far off. They're part of the same tree. And now I think you can throw, obviously, Joey McGuire into that conversation as well after the stuff that the Texas Tech head coach was saying yesterday. So, yeah, Pat Narduzzi loves to hate Notre Dame. And I'm sure, I wonder if you're him, does he really revel in the opportunity to face Notre Dame and, get up for the fact that maybe they can actually beat them? Or is he oh man, we got to face Notre Dame again? What do you think is his mentality? Because you go back to that quote where he's talking about, where he's sounding off at a press conference for the whole world and his and his team to hear you're just not sending the right message to anybody by saying those kind of things. So it just feels like a lot of self-defeatism from Pat Narduzzi, trying to find the things to say, but he just puts his foot in his mouth every time.
Yeah, I think that, honestly, it's kind of his coping mechanism at the end of the day, and a way to kind of spin the situation where he can feel good about making fun of Notre Dame, but also taking some shellackings from Notre Dame at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a defensive coping mechanism to find a way to spin it where he doesn't look like the dunce in this situation.
But that's how he ends up looking when it's all said and done. D-Rock Irish in the YouTube chat has a quote from Ari Wasserman from On3. He says, if you're trying to sustain success at a program, beating Notre Dame in your home stadium should be almost even more important than an ACC game. One would think so.
Yeah, like if you're saying Notre Dame's America's team, wouldn't you want to beat America's team no matter what it took? No matter if they were in the ACC, the Big Ten, the SEC, like they're a blue blood national program. You should always want to beat a team like that.
Yeah, because like here's what Pitt has left on their schedule right now, and they are in the running at this point to be in the they're in the running to get into the ACC championship game. They are currently in a 4-way tie for first place in the conference, and according to the conference standings, they are in third place as of right now. But they have Notre Dame, obviously, this week, and then they follow that with Georgia Tech, a team that is still ranked right now, and Miami. So if they run the table in those 3 games, obviously the Notre Dame game, as he said, doesn't count for the ACC standings, but that is a huge feather in their cap, and they only have 2 losses right now. You beat 3 ranked teams in a row, you build yourself a pretty strong case to possibly get an at-large bid in terms of the college football playoff. You lose to Notre Dame, regardless of what happens in the, you've got to win the conference championship game at that point. But you beat Notre Dame and you win these next 3 games against ranked opponents, you've got just as good a shot as anybody to get an at-large bid in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if you go undefeated and you've got all these ranked wins, one being Notre Dame, and then you go on and lose a 1-point game in the ACC championship, like there's still a chance for you. But dropping down to a loss right now, there's no chance. And so I saw someone bring that up as well. It's like, point blank, you try to win every game, no matter what. You play to win every game. And your coach coming onto the mic at the beginning of the week and saying, basically, not that we're not playing to win, but we don't care if we don't win. That's beyond crazy to say.
Troubling. Yes. We'll take a break. When we come back, by the way, Alan Green, your guy, former Auburn athletic director, former Notre Dame baseball player, the athletic director at Pitt right now. You're going to look him up.
Oh, really?
Maybe go hang out with Alan Green after you
berated him in Omaha.
You didn't berate him. I thought you guys got along pretty well in Omaha.
We did get along. I don't know if he'll remember me, but
just remind him. Just tell him I was the guy who kept forgetting who you were. I'm sure that'll jar his memory.
I'm sure our guy Michael Birch will be there too. So there's a chance that those two might be in the same room.
There you go. That's right. All right. After a break, ACC's throwing some shade at Notre Dame now today as well. We'll talk about that when we return and more. Rapid fire in Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Let's continue some rapid fire. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. So we were talking about the Pittsburgh Pat Narduzzi shade, and the ACC had an interesting tweet. ACC football tweeted this out. They posted this graphic, and at the top of the graphic, I put it up here on the YouTube screen. It says, "Who you got?" And it's Team A versus Team B. On one side, they both have the same record, 7-2. And on one side, it is in the head-to-head. Team A has a win. Team B has a loss. Team A has 3 top 25 wins. Team B has 1. Team A has FPI 35 wins, 4. Team B has 1. And then strength of record, according to ESPN, Team A's is 17, Team B's is 13. Well, of course, they don't say who the teams are, but Team A is Miami, Team B is Notre Dame, and they're trying to make the case for Miami over Notre Dame, even though the College Football Playoff Committee obviously had Notre Dame ranked 8 spots ahead of the Hurricanes in spite of the season opening loss to Miami. So what did you think when you saw this? What do you think of all this? The ACC trying to make its case out there on the social medias for Miami over Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think I might have said this last week, so I'll echo it again. I just love how BYU, Texas Tech, ACC, Virginia fans, all these people now have some prominent opinion when we still have 3 games left to play. Like, why do we exert all this energy when everyone still has to play 3 more games and the final rankings have to come out? Like, that's the thing that's crazy to me. And then the second thing that's crazy is, who does the ACC think they are turning, I get it. Notre Dame's not a part of the ACC for football, but they are everything else. And they, as a university, still provide a lot to the ACC. And so who is the ACC to just throw up this graphic and say, who do you got? And then at the very bottom say, oh, well, it definitely should be Team A. Like, why are you throwing shade at a team, university, that's still predominantly in your conference for everything else? And again, a big reason why there's still stability and structure in the ACC in general.
Notre Dame's the reason the ACC still exists right now. If Notre Dame is not part of that, not part of, like, the fact that, obviously Notre Dame propped up, and without Notre Dame, the ACC network is never created. And the fact that all these Notre Dame road games against these ACC teams end up on TV, whether it's ESPN or ABC or wherever it happens to be. Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Like, Notre Dame, even though they might not be a full-fledged member of the ACC, still props up the conference quite a bit just by being involved to the extent that they're involved. So, I mean, even beyond that, there are a couple more things, because obviously head-to-head is part of the deal. And obviously the ACC is trying to spell out their case with their resume. But, look, Miami isn't a conference. They're in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And you know what place they're in their own conference right now? 7th. They're in 7th place in their own conference right now. So you're trying to make a case for Miami in 7th place, not even in contention to get into the conference championship game. Right now, you're trying to tell us that Miami, because of a factor, head-to-head, that they deserve to be ahead of Notre Dame right now. And as Joe pointed out, the fact that they've got 2 losses to unranked teams. Yeah, both of their losses are worse than Notre Dame's losses. Those are all part of the resume. And I mean, again, like, if you want to go back to this whole thing, I'm new to this whole conference thing, but as of right now, Georgia Tech is in 1st place in the ACC. Virginia is in 2nd place in the ACC. You know who has head-to-head wins over both of those teams? NC State. But NC State doesn't vault to the top of the rankings just because they happen to beat both of those teams, because there are other factors and other games that are played. So a head-to-head is part of the resume. It is part of the equation. It is not the end all be all, especially now when you have 2+ months. Everyone has played more than 3/4 of their season right now, and other factors come into play. Notre Dame continues to trend in the right direction. Miami trending in the wrong direction as we speak right now. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and it's like just look at the last month of the body of work. Miami trending down, Notre Dame trending up. Like, that matters. Where you are at the beginning of the season is not where you are at the end of the season.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that Brian Kelly is suing LSU to receive the $53 million he's owed by the school under the terms of the contract. LSU reportedly offered him a one-time lump sum buyout of $25 million when they relieved him of his duties that Kelly refused, while LSU says it's firing Kelly for cause now, which they believes negates the large buyout.
It's messy. It's so messy. It's beyond messy. I was reading stuff today where basically, like when they first sat down with them, technically who fired him didn't have the authority to fire him. And so Brian Kelly should have technically still been like on the job. And like what cause did Brian Kelly have that magically just appears? Like, I get it. He wasn't coaching well, but there wasn't cause. It's not like he, punched a player or, broke any rules or anything. He just didn't perform to your standards. So
right.
I just think it's really funny that LSU just thought that they could blow this whole thing up and there'd be no repercussions and they could just get out of this, guaranteed money. And I just think the more that they fight this and the more legality that gets involved, one, it makes your program look bad. And two, I just think it's going to favor Brian Kelly more and more. Just if you said you fired him, give him his money and send him on his way.
Yeah. I mean, did they really think that they could get away with, like, look, we know that we've got this in your contract, but here's $25 million and we'll do this in one lump sum. You can have it all right now instead of prorated over the next few years. We'll just do it now. And, you just take this $25 million and you go away. Who in their right mind would go for that?
Who would turn down half the money they're owed when it's in millions?
Exactly. Like, we're not talking about $100,000. We're talking about more than $50 million. And they actually thought he was just going to walk away. I mean, look, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think being a bad recruiter or playing too much golf or being an emotionally detached head coach is a justifiable show cause. I just don't know what they think they have to stand on in this whole thing, unless they've really got something, that they think that they've got in their back pocket. It just doesn't feel like it's going to work out in their favor, though.
It's hilarious. And it's just even more funny that Brian Kelly's at the center of it all, So I'm curious to see more details that come out. But again, I just don't really see a way that Brian Kelly doesn't win in this situation.
I don't either. And as someone just said, Archer in the YouTube chat says, I believe they're going to try to invoke a morality clause. That is part of the deal. What exactly that is and what they think that they've got on him, I don't know. But the bigger picture is this is just such a bad look for LSU.
Right.
Because,
like, who would want to come coach here after this?
Yeah. You fire a coach not even 4 years into his contract with this huge buyout that was obviously very big. And so, like, the AD fires the head coach, and because of the fact that the financials of this deal, were so out of whack, the athletic director ends up getting fired, like within less than a week of Kelly being fired. So your head coach and your AD both get whacked. Like, if you're a good coach, like if you're Lane Kiffin, would you want any part of LSU with all this going on when, like, you can sign whatever, and knowing that if LSU, thinks that it's not going the way they want it, they can just get rid of you and they're not even going to try to honor what it says in your contract? It just, like, it's trending in the right or in the wrong, very wrong direction for LSU right now.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that they meant to fire him after that Texas A&M game, or do you think it was heat of the moment? Everyone was pissed. There's a lot of boosters and money, people of influence that are mad. And, like, you get what I'm saying here? Like, do you think that they really meant to fire him after that Texas A&M game, or it just happened and they're like, well, we got to go with this. Now we got to figure out how to find, $52 million in guaranteed money.
Yeah, I know. Like, it had obviously been building, and I think the biggest, like, hearing the stuff coming out of there, the fact that those other coaches, Saban, Miles, and Orgeron, all won their national championships in their first, was in their first 3 years or first 4 years. Obviously, this was 4 for Brian Kelly. And as soon as he lost that Texas A&M game, they obviously found out that wasn't going to happen. So I think that pushed a lot, and like from things that I had heard, like there were, like donors and boosters in their suites in the stadium who were literally going around, like trying to get commitments from other donors and boosters, like how much you going to kick in to get rid of Brian Kelly, that kind of thing.
Right.
So,
that's what I mean. Like, I feel like all these people
very
conspired
heat of
after
the
the
moment,
game.
emotional. Like if you step back a little bit from the disappointment, maybe you don't quite sink yourself quite as hard. But the other thing is, like when you look at these buyouts, when you look at the buyout that Brian Kelly had, you look at the buyout that James Franklin had, you've already got college football coaches making a lot of money. What I wonder is, do athletic directors, with all the money that's being, and all the money and resources that are being committed between the revenue sharing and, the NIL and all this, all this money that is coming in from different places just for the players themselves, like, I think that they're going to end up restructuring these contracts so that these coaches are getting more per year, and the buyouts become less
Smaller.
back end. Yeah. So that they don't have
Like
to worry.
5-year deals, more upfront, or sorry, more in the yearly salary, but not as much guaranteed anymore.
And also more incentive based, and that's how some of these
like
structured as well, where it's like
8+ wins, 10+ wins.
Like Cignetti has a very incentive based on, if you get to the college football playoff, it's this. If you get to the semifinal, it's this much more. And there are also, like different escalators in his contract that are like, if I get to the college football playoff semifinal and for whatever reason I'm dismissed within X amount of time, the buyout goes up and those kind of things. So I think those kind of structures are going to be a lot more common going forward, where you just have a lot more incentive-based stuff for these coaches and less just straight up guaranteed money without any performance. So Michael in the YouTube chat, going back to Miami, he says, does anyone predict Miami will win out, or do we think that they'll drop one more? They play NC State coming up this week, and NC State has been the giant killer because, again, they have wins over the top 2 teams in the conference right now in both Georgia Tech and Virginia. So Miami has NC State, Virginia Tech, and then they finish at Pittsburgh. By the way, someone else asked who the other 2 ranked wins were, and those were USF and Florida State. So I'm glad you brought that up, because technically, like, even though the ACC is trying to claim those as ranked wins, neither one of those teams are ranked right now. And for college football playoff committee purposes, the ranking only matters at the time, like at the time the rankings are coming out. It doesn't matter what the rankings were back in September, for example, when Miami played USF. USF is not ranked now, so that does not count as a ranked win as far as the college football playoff committee is concerned.
Yeah, unfortunately, when Notre Dame beats Pittsburgh, it won't count as a ranked win, because I don't think Pittsburgh will get re-ranked again.
Right, exactly. Do you think Miami wins out, though? I think it's going to be like the toss-up is going to be that Pitt game at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they have a couple tough games. I think they'll lose another one between NC State and Pitt.
I do too. I think they've got one loss.
And that's what's so funny to me is all these teams want to cry. And it's like, okay, you're Virginia and Louisville and you cried last week. Look what happened. You lost in the next week. Like, why don't we wait until the season's all done before we start crying, before you have, the opportunity to embarrass yourself or stub your toe again?
John Christopher, our old Western PA guy, says Miami loses to Pitt. He is going all in on that. Thank you for the Veteran Day, Brian.
Shout.
Brian writes, I believe he says, And again, we said it in the first hour at the top of the show. Happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there. What were you getting ready to say there, Jess?
Nothing important.
All right. You sure about that? It's always important. Wake Up the Echoes comes your way at the top of the hour here on Sports Radio WSBT, the Notre Dame program. Some interviews coming up on that show. I'm not sure exactly who they've got on today, but Wake Up the Echoes every Tuesday here on WSBT. And don't forget, it is Notre Dame at Pittsburgh this Saturday at noon. You will hear the radio call here on Sports Radio WSBT and the Notre Dame Radio Network, including the Odyssey app, AUD-ACY. Game day show live from 8 to 11 Eastern time this Saturday morning. Join Tim, Jim, Eric, and Tyler. Their guests this week include former Notre Dame All-American and recent College Football Hall of Fame inductee, quarterback Terry Hanratty, and former Fighting Irish offensive lineman Trevor Ruland as well. So that's the game day show, 8 to 11 this Saturday, leading into Notre Dame and Pittsburgh at noon. Appreciate all the happy Veterans Day wishes in the YouTube chat right now. And, of course, again, back at any and all veterans who are listening. We appreciate everybody's service. We'll take our final timeout and then back to wrap up rapid fire with a couple more questions on Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat, IrishBreakdown.com, Rapid Fire, Sean Stiers, Jesse Stiers, winding things down. We got a few minutes to go here, and I've got another question or two for you. I saw this one. I was reading this column in The Athletic today, and so UCLA obviously has a head coaching vacancy after they fired their head coach earlier this season. So this guy got a records requested email because UCLA is a state school. So he got to see like people who were sending in resumes, applications for the UCLA head coaching job. So there's this guy named Sean Peak who applies for the job at UCLA. What are Sean Peak's qualifications? Should use air quotes with qualifications. Well, the guy emphasized that he has won 6 EA Sports College Football National Championships in dynasty mode, mind you, in dynasty mode, not just Eddie mode. He says, quote, "I simply don't lose," end quote. He also detailed how he maxed out his entire roster with 99 overall ratings and is consistently signing 5-star recruits. Quote from Sean Peak, the applicant, "I am confident that my digital dominance can translate directly to the Rose Bowl turf. My leadership style is simple. Go for 2 every time, run Hail Marys on first down, and always, always make sure my players look good in alternate uniforms. Please let me know when I can expect my headset, whistle, and university credit card for recruiting trips." This is an actual application for the UCLA head coaching vacancy. Rate that effort on a scale of 1 to 10, Jesse.
Yeah, that's a 10 out of 10 effort, but what that screams to me is almost that's a 10 out of 10 effort for me, but what that screams more so is who set him up to do this. This feels like a guy who lost his fantasy football and had to send in an application, or maybe there's something there's more to this. I don't think he just submitted this for the fun of it. Maybe he did, and I truly think it's funny.
You don't think that guys like this apply for every vacancy that comes open, that there's some guy who's either a fantasy football genius or he's doing this, he's the great play caller on the video on Madden or
no, that's whatever. An even better resume is if you can say I have like 5 straight dynasty fantasy football championships, that could be even more impressive. But no, you're right. I think that there are guys out there who are constantly, spamming these applications, partially for the fun of it, but also hoping to get, some feedback back.
It's like Ben Affleck shows up at the interview on Good Will Hunting with the white socks, and he's kicking back, and he's like, "Heretofore," like put it in this hand and whatever. Like, would you be tempted? I rate the effort on a 10 out of 10. Obviously, very creative. How serious he was. You're right. Like, was this guy actually serious, or was it some prank just to see if it got through, to see if he heard anything back? Could be the latter. I tend to think that there's probably a very specific percentage of people who literally think because they're winning on the video games that they're qualified to be a football coach as well. If you're the AD, would you be curious just to see what this guy looked like? Would you at least like do a Zoom conference, like spend 10 to 15 minutes with this guy in a Zoom call just to see what he looked like? Or would
I think at the end of the day, you can at least have fun with it. Give the guy 10, 15 minutes, maybe have him pull up some of this EA Sports and see what he's all about. I think that there would be some fun kind of, what's the word, like giving acknowledgement to it, or kind of, playing around with it a little bit. Why not?
Yeah, I agree. Fill in the blank. The New York Giants firing head coach Brian Daboll while keeping general manager Joe Shane is blank.
It's hilarious. Some of these recent, teams feel like they're in this constant purgatory state if they just can't figure it out. And if you're the Giants, how did you draft Jackson Dart and Cam Scatteraboo, who were very like players that your head coach Dable wanted, and then you're going to fire him mid-season, knowing that he's one of the best quarterback developers in the game right now. He developed Josh Allen before he left to become the Giants head coach. And then I told you this the other day, it's like you're getting mad at the guy when you, as the GM, traded Saquon Barkley within the division and watched the Eagles win a Super Bowl. You're going to fire someone.
He didn't trade him. He let him walk. Yeah. I
right.
mean,
Sorry, let him walk.
I was going to say.
You didn't even get anything out of it.
Brian Dable is not on national TV, like when, on Hard Knocks, when all this stuff went down, with the biggest blunder of the century, letting Saquon Barkley walk and then go to a division rival and win a Super Bowl the next year. Like there is much more egg. Like Joe Shane came off as, a nice enough guy, but a very aw shucks guy and a guy who is in over his head on that show. That's not how Brian Dable comes off. And I feel like if you're going to let Dable draft a quarterback, get his guy, he's still a rookie. And by the way, they're playing better, even though they're not winning games. And look, they're in a division. They're a division rival of a team, like we root against the New York Giants, but I think Brian Dable is better at his job than Joe Shane is better at his job. So personally, I think they fired the wrong guy.
Yeah. Like, again, what I get, I think what they're frustrated with is the Giants have been in some close games and they've kind of blown all of them late in the fourth. I mean, what do you expect? You have a young team. Like you have Jackson Dart as your quarterback. Let's not forget Dable took them to the playoffs within the last 3 or 4 years, So it's like, I don't know, just to completely give up on the guy after you committed all of those resources to the draft of kind of who your head coach wanted. This is why I think the NFL is kind of a sloppy business at times, because now you're going to get a new head coach. Are they going to be all on board with Scattaboo and Jackson Dart and everything? So it's like you see too much turnover.
Yep, exactly. I agree. I was shocked by the fact that they pulled the plug when they did, regardless of how many games they've lost on the road and everything else. All right, well, we're going to have to wrap it up with that. Jesse, good stuff as always. Everyone in the chat, good stuff as always. Again, happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans out there. I know we've got a lot of listeners and viewers. Appreciate your service, of course. And again, you're welcome to everyone who's not a veteran who got the day off today. Jesse, I will talk to you later. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll talk to you Friday. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat, IrishBreakdown.com.